Okay, 1 second. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Faye. I saw you come on. Hi, Faye. And welcome, Yehuda. We have never met in person, but I'm Ilana Stockman, Miriam's friend. I call myself, I always called myself on Team Miriam GamAni, you know, because she was just, she was, you know what, we'll start in a second. Let's just wait for everybody, if people are still coming on. So I say that I was on Team Miriam because she was, she led us, she led me. She always knew what to say and what to do. She had this incredible way of leading GamAni in a way that was 100% about compassion for the people there and for the people who needed it. Always, always, whenever we had any kind of question or dilemma, the guiding thought was always whatever's right for the victims, whatever's right, always. That was what guided her. It was just like, really, it was compassion combined with fierce intelligence. Really, she really understood things and she saw things. And it was really a privilege. It was such a privilege to learn from her, to watch her in action, to see how she thought, to see how she felt, to see how she dealt with really difficult things. I mean, in GamAni, we see a lot of difficult things. We see people coming on with a lot of pain and trauma. And Miriam was able to respond to people with this really intelligent understanding and compassion, along with just sort of acceptance and holding space.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Sorry, somebody, we should start this in a more formal way and introduce people. I'm Ilana Stockman, and I was one of Miriam's mods. What I said before, I always said that I was on Team Miriam because she always knew what to do, and she was just, it's really hard for me to be thinking about this in the past tense. I'm sure it's hard for all of you also. When we all found out that Miriam died, so many of us were just like in this shock, you know, because she was so vibrant, so present. Just, you know, she was there. She was like our backbone in our community. And I feel like I took that for granted a little bit. Anyway, so that's why many of us, after she died, were like sort of furiously chatting with each other because it's like, what? You know, and then we started sharing all the different ways that Miriam helped us, each of us. You know, she helped me too. She helped me in a lot of my understandings about a lot of things. We chatted so much about so many things. We chatted about orthodoxy and about politics and about work and about just everything, food, television. We talked about television. I downloaded our chats. I have 117 pages of chat. So I've been like reading through them. And, you know, I also, I had some interviews with her, which I consolidated and put into a video. I created a 10-minute video clip of some stuff that I had with her. She recently spoke on a panel about sexual abuse in GamAni, and a couple of years ago, I interviewed her. So anyway, so I'm going to show that in our forum tonight. So number one, most important, is I really want to say to Faye and Judah and to Ronnie, I want to say how I want to offer you my condolences. I can only imagine, how big of a loss this is. If she was a loss for me, I can only just imagine what kind of, gaping hole this leaves for you. So I just want to say that you're in my heart, that I think about you, and I wish you comfort wherever that comfort comes from. Today, I'm in Israel, so it's 8 o'clock at night here. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. So it's tonight. Our plan tonight for the next hour or so is just sharing. It's really just allowing a space for the people in the GamAni community who were affected by Miriam to share what she meant and how she helped or supported or just, was a friend in whatever way she was. So we have a few people who are going to speak, but anybody is welcome, and certainly Miriam's family are all welcome to share or to react or interrupt anything. Okay, this is not. It just is. We're just doing what comes naturally here. So jump in, and then after a few people speak, I'll share the video clips that I have of Miriam. So let's start with Asher. Asher, do you want to share first? You wrote such a beautiful post, so we thought maybe you'd start there.
Sure, thank you. I don't actually remember how I got connected to Miriam in the first place. But I know it was around the time that I was kind of trying to figure out what to do with Zaka, and I remember I didn't really know what I was doing, and somehow I got connected with Miriam, quite possibly through the GamAni group, and one of the most helpful things to start with was I just had all these ideas. I didn't know what I was doing. I would just like talk and talk and talk and talk and talk at Miriam, and she would just sit there and listen, and then I would stop, and then she would like very, very gently tell me all the ways in which I didn't know what I was talking about, and all the things I should do instead of and like in a constructive way, and in a way that really like led me toward the right people and toward the right places. I've been going through my messages. It's a lot of messages. I have 4 years worth of messages, and trying to remember all the conversations that we had, all the interactions that we had, all the ways in which she helped. And it's a very long list, and I don't have the time to recount all of them, so I'll just give the highlights. After the passage of the Child Victims Act in 2019 in New York, I started working on a federal version of the Child Victims Act. So I was going down to DC very often to lobby in Congress. And when Miriam saw that I was coming down to around where she was, she started asking if she could meet up for dinner to discuss Zaka. So after a full day in Congress, I would meet up with Miriam at Shook, and again, it would be the same thing. I would just like, she'd ask me what was going on, what's going on with Zaka. I would just unload, and with all the things that were like bothering me about what was going on with Zaka, about all the anxieties I had about the future, she would like very calmly like address every single one of them and give me excellent advice. She's the reason why Zaka got its fiscal sponsorship with SNAP, which is ultimately why we were able to expand. She got us the lawyer that we used to set up the fiscal sponsorship contract. She got us half of our funding comes from a connection that she made to the Good People Fund with Naomi Eisenberger. When I was working on cases that Miriam had a familiarity with, because she knew the Jewish nonprofit world in a way that I don't think anybody else does, but in a way that certainly I didn't know, because I don't come from that world. So she'd see me sort of stumbling around on a case and message me and say, okay, here's all the background. Here are all the players. This is what you have to know. Here's how you avoid stepping in it. Here's how you get what you want. And like, just, very gently, like guiding and making sure that I understood, what I was doing. Because a lot of the times I didn't. And it was like Miriam who stepped in and made sure I did. When the YU commentator article came out, she found out that I was talking to the survivor in that case, and we started to discuss the issue of the non-disclosure agreement that person signed, and she recommended, she made a connection between me and the lawyer who I ended up recommending to the survivor in that case. And I've been going back and just seeing like all the little, just like, she'd mentioned something offhand, like, oh, there's this Upstart program that you should get into. It would be really good for Zaka. And it just so happens I did join Upstart, and it like really launched Zaka in a direction that it wouldn't have gone otherwise. And just the amount of time that she spent on Zaka, I didn't understand it in context of how much time she was spending with everybody else. I mean, I was like incredibly grateful because she seemed busy on her own. I was like very honored that she was taking the time. And when she passed, just seeing like exactly how much she was doing for everybody was incredible. And what was even more incredible and such an honor was finding out, not only the time that she spent in talking to me about Zaka, but in the time that she spent talking to other people about Zaka, because I thought, okay, she helped me along with everybody else. I didn't know that, but it was a real honor learning that Zaka was a special project to her, because where we are at Zaka, she's a very special person to us, because we wouldn't be here without the help that she gave. So may her memory be a blessing. And I just want to mention the fundraiser that was set up in her name on the Zaka website. There are a lot of messages. We've gotten let's see, we've gotten I mean, there were about $10,000 worth of donations came in. And in terms of messages that were left for the family and for everybody, there were 47 people so far who sent in messages. And I'm gonna get them bundled and over to Faye and Yehuda and Roni, because there are some really nice messages in there. And just thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm honored that I could say something in memory of Miriam.
Thanks, Asher. Thank you so much for that. I just want to also say that she treated every single person she chatted with as if they were the whole world. There were many, many times when she would like be chatting with someone she met on the group for hours, sometimes days. Sometimes she would spend like a whole weekend having had like hours and hours of chats with someone. And every time I would say to her, do you want a break? Do you want me to like take over or something? She said, no, like she really did not want me to take over. She wanted to be doing that. And she didn't do it for any kind of like, out of any kind of desire for any recognition. It was 100% behind the scenes. She was doing it 100% out of care. She just cared. She cared about every single person, and she made you feel like you were the whole world when she was chatting with you. So I'm glad that you had that experience. Our next speaker will be Sarah Ruth Hoffman. Sarah, you there?
Yep, I am here. Yeah, thank you so much. I also don't remember how I met Miriam. I just know it was probably through Facebook. And I was going through so much around that time because I was going through probably the worst trauma of my life. And the memories that I have from that time period are all a blur. But I know that ultimately I ended up in GamAni. So that was a good thing. I know that the group was extremely important to my recovery and survival, and that people who were active in the group and took notice of local news article about my story and then brought it to like the forward and everything, just having that like place for activists to talk and to feel empowered to take action was crucial, because I don't know how I would have survived my whole experience if it weren't for this group and the people in it and all that they did for me. I know that Miriam started, talking to me one-on-one at some point over the years. And she just, like people said, made you feel like, you were the only person in the world in that moment. She had such a great mindfulness when she spoke to you. And something that was extraordinary about her was that she could talk to a person who was really triggered and traumatized and go back and forth between the extraordinary and profound that is in the trauma and the ordinary and the mundane, which is grounding. And so talking to her, you could both address these really important things that are really scary and big, but also remember what's right in front of you, like this cup of tea or, the beautiful flowers. And she was so relatable in that way. So she could deal with the big and profound and the simple. And it was so important that she could do that. I moved to Silver Spring after a couple of years, and I got to meet her in person, and it was incredible. We went to some tea place, and I remember thinking, this woman is so cool. Like, she just exudes coolness. Like, I was like, this is not cool, like, oh, she's so cool, but just there was such a goodness that was radiating from her. And you just felt like, wow, she's so mature. She's so like grounded and she gets it. And that was amazing. And in that moment, she immediately became a role model for me. Me as a young woman who just completed my PhD and had just moved for a big job, and she, a woman who is a professional woman, well on the path, very accomplished. And I thought, how can I be like her? Because she has all of this extraordinary success, but she hasn't forgotten what life is about, and she really makes you feel important no matter who you are. Throughout all of our messages through the pandemic, and some of the things that I went through that were triggering stuff with CCAR and whatnot, she remained, able to have both conversations with me, the profound and the ordinary. And towards the end, she had talked about having me at some point, but then things kept happening. The last time I talked to her on Messenger, it was a conversation about a difficult person in my life. And I was trying to set boundaries with this person, but they were overzealous and I couldn't figure out how to get them to just, back off. And I said to Miriam, how do you deal with people that just want to take up all of your time? And she was like, I still have to figure that out. She basically told me she still deals with that kind of issue. And I loved that because I specifically wrote her, I'm writing you because you seem like the sort of woman that maybe this sort of thing wouldn't happen to. You're so put together, you've got it all together. But no, she said, I'm just like you. I deal with this thing too. It's still a struggle. And then she said to me, her last message ever to me was, I wish I could give you a big hug. And so when I went back after she passed away and I looked through my messages, and that's the last thing sitting in my little inbox, and it's wonderful. This is really tragic, and I'm sad because I don't know now, who will be our Miriam. I mean, she was the flagship. She was like such a leader. And one of my thoughts was, what are we going to do now? Oh my gosh, but then I remembered that when Moses died, or not died, when Moses was gone too long, people freaked out and that led to bad things. So I thought, don't panic. You know, she may be no longer here, but we can do this. You know, we can do this. We can remember her and think, what would Miriam have done? Or we can see the strength in ourselves, because I know she always saw the strength in me. So those are kind of the things that I've been thinking about. I think I'm still a little bit in shock, because when I saw the news, my first thought was, Miriam can't die. Like, it just doesn't even register, because she just was so present. One of those people who is just so present. And so I just thought, my brain is like, that's impossible. It's impossible. And that's kind of still where I'm at. So I'm a little bit, yeah, but her memory already is a blessing, at least in my home. So I'm just, my heart goes out, Yehuda and Faye and everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I just want to say that all of us together will somehow be doing what she did. We'll all be doing it for each other. I think that's part of her legacy, is she left a little bit of herself in all of us, you know, in that way. So it's scattered. When the mods of GamAni got together to try to figure out how we're gonna fill in this big hole, you know, in terms of admin things, and we realized she was actually doing the work of 3 people. Like, really, she was doing the work of 3 people. So now everything she did, we have to sort of like scatter among a bunch of people, which maybe is something special in its own way, you know, that she really left herself in all of us. Toph, okay, thank you so much for that. Sharon Weiss Greenberg, are you here?
Hi. There's a lot that I can't say, in that I didn't have the good fortune to ever meet and have coffee and get to know Miriam well. What I did want to share is how I never could have gotten through the past 7 years, as awful as they were, without her and without this group. And it was just, Me Too happened, and all of a sudden the world changed in a way that I had hoped for the better. And my world became a lot worse and darker and weaker. And Miriam, whether it had to do with my own personal situation or others, just around the clock, even though I moved across the world, was there. And she would answer and be sensitive. And there are times where you get angry when you're going through what you're going through. You sometimes lash out at the wrong people. And I'm sure there are times where I said, like, why don't you defend me? You know, like, she just knew how to handle any and every mood of every person and understood you in a way that I don't know how she did. And I can say with certainty that throughout this entire time, I was so grateful for her having created the space where I could always direct people, either because it held some of my secrets and some of the things that I couldn't say, and some of my loved ones. And it was a place where I knew that change would initiate and happen, where people could come together and learn from and with each other and speak up in a way that the world doesn't always let us do. And she cared so much, and we didn't grow up together. It wasn't decades. She just cared so much so that I was in a bit of a mess as her life was coming to an end. And she called twice, and I answered and no one was there. And I thought she called by mistake. I said, I hope everything's okay. You called by mistake. And I didn't know, but in knowing everything that I know about her and everything that everyone else has shared about her, and she cared to the very end with every last breath and bit of strength. And I'm forever grateful and forever inspired, and forever humbled by her. And I'm just grateful for everyone gathering here today.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It's true, by the way, that she saw people at their worst. And, you know, Sarah said that too. She saw people going through really terrible things. And she responded always without any kind of judgment, with any irritation or impatience. It was 100% acceptance of exactly who you are and what you're going through in that moment, with like real love and understanding. You know, whatever it was that you were going through, it was all okay. we see a lot of really hard things in GamAni, and we see sometimes, terrible interactions and all, not, on purpose, but like people come with a lot of trauma. And she was just okay with it. She was totally just okay with it, fully accepting people exactly in the space that they're in. It's such a huge lesson. I'm really trying to emulate that. So anyway, thank you, Sharon. Next, we'll hear from Hannah Katzman. Hannah?
Hi. Okay, I have I guess a slightly different relationship with Miriam, because it wasn't only through this group. As I wrote, and I'm sure most of you read, how someone connected us. They thought we would have something in common, and at some point we started writing to each other, and I saw, like a lot of you shared, the conversation became very intense, and pretty quickly we were sharing all kinds of things about our children and personal things that were happening. And I wasn't really, even though I had written already about abuse, and I think it was like even before Lev Tahor, when I worked with Yerachmiel and Doron, who were in this meeting, who really mentored me and taught me a lot about abuse and how abusers work. One thing I remember that really made me realize that Miriam understood this topic had to do with her work for an organization called DV Leap, Domestic Violence. And I learned from her about how often, first of all, how difficult people who accuse sometimes are not people who are, we just said that before, like Sharon mentioned how she sometimes wasn't maybe the most pleasant person to deal with because of what she was going through, and how that's not a reason not to believe someone, and how accusers are often people who are accusing have gone through so much that they aren't always they get criticized, and she wouldn't never put up with anything like that. No criticism of abusers, no criticism of accusers. That would just not go with her. And then later on, and I wasn't a moderator on GamAni at all. And again, it's a little bit not my world because I'm not in America anymore. And I never worked in that area, but she had but she would share with me some of the growing pains. I probably knew about 1/50th of what she was involved with. Occasionally she would tell me a little bit, and there were certain cases that I was involved with or I had some knowledge. But she, one thing I remember about GamAni is if I would post something that was relevant for GamAni, an article, she would say, could you please post that on GamAni? And then she was doing that all the time because I would just forget. And she would say no, and she didn't want to do it herself. She wanted other people to do it. So that was one thing I did for Miriam. I would post articles at her request in GamAni because it was really important to just that these things show up there. Another thing that I saw, which wasn't directly in GamAni, but when people on Facebook would be defending abusers, she would come in and respond to them. And she did it in such a way, she would never attack anybody. She would never criticize anybody. She would just reframe it in a way to make it clear that, that they were looking at it from the wrong perspective. And I think of anything that she did, I also want to say something about around the clock. Often she was up in the middle of the night and she would respond to me. We're different time zones, obviously. And she would always say, like if I type in the middle of the night, then it's hard for me to fall back asleep. Miriam would just say, I'm falling asleep now. Don't, it's okay if I don't write you back yet. That was something I'll miss. But she, and this has been said before, but it's worth saying again, that she knew how to put the victim in the center. That was it. You mentioned compassion. It was part of that same thing. It was, if you put the victim in the center, then that will always guide you. That will be your compass. And that will help you figure out what is the right thing to do. Because we get distracted so often by the family and by the institution and by the good things that the abuser did and so on. And we just have to look at the victim. And that's something that that I'll always feel that she really excelled at.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Hannah. She was really brilliant at social media and like she was everywhere all the time, like Superman. She was just everywhere all the time, but really quite brilliant about social media. And we once had an argument. We had somebody come onto the group once, like a 20-year-old or 22-year-old who was like, this group is just run by old people who don't know how to run social media. You know, and she just laughed. She thought it was the funniest thing.
I think one thing that somebody mentioned was, I think Faye said it, she just was so fast. She was so fast that she could write, to 20 people in a very short time. And it didn't really, you say she spent hours, but probably talking to somebody, but probably most of that time she was just waiting for them to type, and she was doing something else. She
like literally doing like 8 things, 8 conversations at once. Yeah.
Right.
So thank you, Hannah. Next, we're going to hear from Shayna. Shayna, you here? Hi, Shayna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry, everyone, for your loss. I only interacted with Miriam a few times over text. I think it's just crazy how someone can impact your life in such a significant way over text a couple of times. And so I guess the context that I'm coming from is, the Orthodox Jewish community that I was raised in. I was very much socialized to take the blame on myself, not speak up, try to explain away the actions of people who did bad things, try to, find the redeeming qualities, do things in the name of chesed, kind of to a fault. And I never really found my place in the context of the Me Too movement. I didn't really felt like I was able to say that about myself, that I belonged there, even when I published my story publicly. And then Miriam came along and she was like, yeah, this is for you, unequivocally for you. This is your spot, come be a part of this community. And I think, the compassion and the putting the victim in the spotlight, which is really what I felt from her. Another thing I experienced was her conviction, just totally unapologetic, sorry if I offend you, that victims deserve, compassion, but I'm going to give compassion to the victims, was kind of what she was doing. And I think I benefited so much from it was kind of like a transformative experience for me, of like victim to survivor, or being alone to having a community and having a place. And so much so to the point where she kind of, in her small ways, and I wonder, if I had known her for years or spoken to her in person, how much more I would have gained from that, but just allowing me to have my feelings the way they were. For example, I was considering leaving the GamAni group because there was someone in there that made me feel unsafe. And I shared that with her. I said, I'm considering staying or leaving because I don't feel comfortable kind of being in the same group as this person. And she said, oh, well, I'll remove that person. And then she removed that person. And I was like, what? I'm allowed to have an opinion. I'm allowed to advocate for myself. I'm allowed to identify as someone who deserves care and community, and compassion. And I think, her words were, I think we all know, like her words were so deliberate, she said, that's wrong, right? People would respond to my story and say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And for her, she was just like, no, that's wrong. That's bad. Let's fix this. Let's do better. And I think, I don't know, one thing that I experienced kind of in my own personal life with loss is the honor of being one of the people that gets to mourn that person. And I think all of us here, and I guess I'm even on the outer end of this circle, I think it's an honor to be one of the people that gets to feel the loss of Miriam. As horrible the loss is, I think, I don't know, I get to live the rest of my life completely differently because someone looked at me and said, yeah, you matter just because you're you. So anyway, thank you for having me. And again, I'm so sorry for everyone's loss.
Wow, Shayna, what a story. And wow, that was really powerful what you said also about the privilege of being able to hang on to that. That was really powerful. So thank you so much for that. Okay, we have, as far as I know, 2 more speakers and then the video, right? We have Yonina and then Judy. Let's do Yehuda.
I'm sorry, I have to take Roni to the airport, but this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I look forward to watching the rest of this, and thank you all for sharing and learning all these things about my wife and her mother has been very inspirational, and thank you all. Really appreciate it. But we do have to go and get her back home.
Yeah,
Let's
Thank you, Yehuda.
travel, Roni.
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Sending you so much, just so much care and thinking of you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Anna, maybe I'll say a few words after everyone's done, just a few on behalf of the family.
You want to speak now, Faye, or you want to?
I'll go after everyone else, okay?
Okay, so we're going to hear now from Yonina Siegel and then from Judy Gelman. Then I'm going to show some clips of Miriam and then Faye. Unless somebody else here wants to speak also, just send me a chat and let me know. Otherwise, that's the program for the rest. Okay, Yonina.
I'm Yonina Siegel. I grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts. So I knew Miriam and Faye from when I was little. So that's how I came into Miriam's story. She was something special, as everybody knows. She wasn't a friend of mine when I was growing up because she was older than I was, but she and Faye remember me from when I was little, and they remember my family. They remember my mother.
So adorable.
Thank you.
You think her hair is nice now. She has like big curls. Yeah.
So there's something very special about people who you knew who knew you from when you were little, who knew your family from when you were growing up, who came from the same place, who had a lot of the same touchstones of landmarks and other things like that in your life. And she came back into my life as an adult. I wrote to Faye and to Yehuda and to Roni that I guess it was partly through Faye being a fellow parent at SIR, and partly through, I think, bumping into her at some point on the West Side when she was probably visiting Faye and her family. And somehow she was a very welcoming person to have a conversation with. And these were all, again, almost always conversations over Facebook messages or emails. I live in Riverdale now. Riverdale has been the center of too much. Everybody on this has been through too much, but Riverdale's been through a lot in the last number of years, from rabbis to teachers to assistant principals to other people who we've all talked about recently.
Some we're going to be talking about soon.
Okay. Some of whom I see in Shul or in the neighborhood all the time. One of whom, thankfully, is in prison. But it didn't feel safe here for a long time to be able to talk about what our experiences were living here even, or what we heard from other people about what had happened, because there was a lot, and there still is, I'm sure, a lot of animosity towards the people who took the sides of the people who had been victimized and the people who had gone through and still going through all this trauma. And Miriam was a safe haven and a listening ear, and I guess a quiet listening ear while I was busy typing, and then through her fingertips, as other people have said, she knew what to say, and she knew how to encourage honesty and truth, and to make me feel very comfortable that I could have the complete confidence that she was an ear who heard and not a mouth who was going to tell my story to other people unless I wanted her to. And all of that, again, like other people said, also at different hours of the day and night. And I was hoping that she wouldn't be on Facebook, a messenger, checking her messages, because I felt bad taking her. I felt like I was taking her away from her family sometimes, but she really, really made a difference. and she will always make a difference. And I think I always, as I say, she left a strong impression on every single one of us who met her, spoke to her, texted with her, Facebook messaged with her, or just read her posts on GamAni. And she introduced me to GamAni and to some of the rest of you who are on here. I met you virtually through Miriam, for better or for worse for all of you. And every single person who had any kind of contact with her carries her with us. And I found that to be somewhat comforting in my life when I know that people I love are carried with so many other people I don't even know, who they touched, who had some kind of interaction, who made a difference. They made a difference in their lives, and Miriam really made a difference in so many people's lives, and she made a real difference in my life. And I was so sad when I heard, and my heart is always with you, Faye, and with Yehuda, and with Roni. And I wish you whatever comfort and nachama you can have in hearing everybody else's wonderful memories and your own memories of growing up and everything else, and of the great love that Yehuda and Miriam had, and Roni being part of that love. And just that was such a beautiful family, and it always will be. And thank you for letting me speak.
Ilana, Rabbi Yosef Blau has just joined, and I think a lot of people here don't know who he is. I just want to suggest that you ask him to speak if he would like to. I don't want to put him on the spot, but he is an extremely important behind the scene. He was like,
Yes.
let's say that I've been in a lot of situations where Miriam has advised me to not have a speaker speak in our shul or things like that, and then totally shut down. And then I'm like, well, I spoke with Rabbi Blau, and that's like, in the Orthodox world, his credibility on this. I mean, I think everyone should have credibility. Don't get me wrong. Of course, Miriam trained me that the victims are important. But as you all know, people are often, the first thing they do is like, oh, let's do a speaking tour or whatever, speak in the shul. So if Rabbi Blau wants to, if not,
Rabbi Blau, do you here? I'm gonna unmute you for a second. Rabbi Blau, I see you here. I know Rabbi Blau's wife. She used to be my supervisor when I taught at Sheva a zillion years ago. Rabbi Blau, are you there?
I'm here. Unfortunately, my
Hi,
wife didn't know I was at Yeshiva when someone sent me an email, and I wasn't able to get to my wife. Miriam was my wife's student, and we go back to Brookline to Miriam and Faye's parents. It's a long relationship, and I just didn't come on to speak. I came to listen and to just be here as an expression of appreciation for all the work that Miriam was doing. I found out about it from a third party. I don't think we spoke once about the issues. We didn't live in the same city. I heard Miriam's name, and then this one spoke about Miriam, and that one spoke about Miriam. And she was a very special person, and she aided so many people who were struggling to overcome all the feelings that remain years later after the abuse. And I just wanted to be at the meeting to show support, to appreciate Miriam, and to support to everybody at the meeting as well. I didn't intend to push me into the conversation. I'm not prepared to speak. Presence, sometimes even quiet presence, counts for something.
It absolutely counts. It absolutely counts for something. Thank you. And that was actually one of Miriam's legacies also, the holding space. She was excellent at just holding space with people. She did that all the time. Anyway, it means a lot that you're here, so thank you. And right Now we're going to hear from Judy. Yerachmiel, do you want to speak also? You're coming up here.
So I got to GamAni through Miriam. I met Miriam. She was the one fundraising from me when she first came to DC through NIF. And I will say I've had many relationships with many people who were, supposedly my fundraiser, but she's the only one who became a true friend. And I just wanted to add some context to Miriam. Miriam was remarkable in so many ways. You could talk to her about lipstick, you could talk to her about shoes, you could talk to her about fashion, you should talk to her about kids, you could talk to her about, private school parents, you could talk to her about public school parents. She watched every TV show. She read every news article. I can't imagine what she would say about Johnny Depp and Amanda and Amber Heard. I would love to hear her take on it. She was in my book group, and I invited her into this book group, and it became Miriam's book group because Miriam was such a connoisseur of books and knew every author, and she had so much insight into every book we read. And she would always say, well, I had to read it at the last minute, otherwise I wouldn't remember it. I really do not know how Miriam fit everything she did in her life into a 24-hour day. I just have this vision of her having Hermione Granger's time turner so that she could keep going back and reliving hours so that she could text with everyone she texted with. And at her funeral, there were so many people who I knew from other circles, who she knew from totally other circles, and loved her in just the way that everyone here loved her, and she gave hours to people, not counting all the hours she gave to her actual work at the foundation that she ran, and to her husband, to her daughter, who she was so devoted to. She was a gourmet cook. She was always, we were always sharing recipes, and she was just so well-rounded. I feel like she was such a gift to have as a friend. And I just wanted to bring that perspective of this other aspect of Miriam, because she was one of the most well-rounded people I've ever known.
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. She talked about recipes a lot, actually. The cooking she talked a lot about, and clothes and television. I also have a couple of television shows that I really would like to talk to her about. That Anatomy of a Scandal I just watched. I would really love to hear her take on that too.
I read a book she recommended to me recently. She said to me, you have to read this book, Excellent Women by Barbara Prim, which I had never read. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so the last thing we have here now is I made this clip. It's bits of her speaking. She spoke on February 27th on a panel about sexual abuse in the Jewish community. Along with Asha was also on that panel, and so was Karen McGinnity, who couldn't be here tonight. Karen really wanted to speak. She was going to send video, but anyway, her presence is here. She sends her regards. Anyway, so I have a little bit of that clip from when she spoke, a couple of minutes from that, and then the clip from when I interviewed her in 2018. In both of the clips, she's talking about this work, right, and what this work means to her. So here you go. Is that okay? Do you see it?
Yeah.
Oh wait, I didn't press the button. Oh, okay. Okay.
I was approached, when the Me Too happened, I was approached by an old friend to be asked if I would be a moderator at the GamAni Facebook page. And I just wanted to discuss some of the things that I've learned and seen from being the moderator to being one of the moderators on the page. And I want to say one of the things that I feel really works for me on the page is that I am not involved professionally in the Jewish world anymore. So I see Ilana has written also holy work, but just as I'm saying, I'm not involved in the Jewish world, so that I don't care. I'll say no polite way to say it. I don't care who I piss off. I'm not invested. So I have no investment, in any Jewish organization. I have worked in Jewish organizations, but I'm not going to again. So, none of the politics matters to me. Sometimes I have to have some of the politics explained to me by other people, so I know who we're dealing with, but I don't care about anyone. I only care about the people who come, who write to us. And like the people who've spoken before me, I'm a vault too. I hear all sorts of things. Now, what's interesting is that when the Facebook group was set up, the idea was for it to be focused on sexual harassment in Jewish organizations, or sort of the kind of case, or the Jewish world. But actually, initially, it was just going to be in Jewish organizations. So the idea was, could Jewish organizations be sued for sexual harassment? So it was the Me Too moment. So, were there Jewish federations where it was really bad? Were there specific Jewish organizations where the harassment was bad? And that was really the idea of the Facebook group, to try to route that out. Well, two things happened pretty quickly. People didn't want to speak up about specific workplaces, and there was a need for people to speak up about the abuse they had suffered, not just sexual harassment, but all other kinds of abuse. If it was abuse in their marriages, if it was abuse they'd suffered as children, either in the home or at schools, if it was abuse that their children had suffered in school and camps, the whole, and more, the whole range of abuse. And we sort of had to make the decision that we were open to hear it all, because there was such a need. And we were also finding that there were public Jewish figures, or, abused by rabbis, just all these, famous teachers, all these kinds of different kinds of abuse by other public figures, members of Knesset, other kinds of machers in the Jewish world, people taking advantage of their position. So, we became a place for it, and, we definitely wanted to hear it. Of course, there were, and I hate to say, successes. Karen is one example of a success, that were, something came to light, and something was done about it. I do feel that for each individual woman who, is able to come forward and who is able to sue her harasser, that's a victory. And I do believe in systemic change, and I wish that we'd been able to accomplish more in this time through systemic change. Like, day by day, I'm an optimist, and each time I hear about a harasser, I'm shocked. I'm shocked anew, as if I didn't know this exists. So I don't want to sound smug about this, because I don't mean to sound smug. I don't think I've ever had any, I have not had personal experiences with violence against me, other than the usual GamAni things, say I have to laugh about it, but yes, cat calls and, men starting up with me inappropriately and things like that. But I know I'm sounding like casual and facetious about this, but
Yeah.
nothing, luckily, although I've been very involved in violence against women, I have not had an abusive boyfriend or something like that, which many women who were involved in the movement have been through. So I don't want to be dismissive about it, and I don't think that makes me more virtuous. I really know it just makes me lucky. But of course, as soon as the Me Too thing came out, like, of course, I know from a very young age, I developed early, so I had men catcalling me on the street. I had an incident as a very young girl where some man called me over and kissed me, and I was too young to know what to do. I was 12 and I didn't know what to do, so I allowed myself to be kissed. And just a lifetime, men exposing themselves on the subway, men rubbing themselves up against me. While there was no abusive boyfriend, there were, people who didn't behave appropriately. People, they were able to eventually hear no, but not when they should have. So a life is a woman. So, and I just think that's typical. So, but I want to say, but other than that, I don't feel, that's what I'm just trying to say, but let's say when I worked at the domestic violence organization, many of the people were survivors. So I'm not of an abusive relationship. So, thankfully I'm not. But I do somehow, I've just always felt passionate about women's issues. So when this came up, I just felt strongly about it. I just felt like this was my time to get involved. This was something I could be, involved in. And I felt like I had I felt like I've learned a lot from the various, readings that I've done, professional experiences that I've had, running the hotline at the Shula was really, informative. I mean, I learned a lot at that time. So that was sort of those were sort of early days of sexual harassment being considered something to be dealt with. Just when you look at sort of who's involved in GamAni, like a lot of us have been dealing with these issues in one way or another for a long time. So we were ready to spring into action. First of all, I really do see the power of all of the GamAni activities, the Facebook group, and the other accompanying things that you're doing. I think people speaking up. I mean, I think the fact that someone was finally willing to speak out against Michael Steinhardt and other big names, I think it's all happening, so I think it's fine, for those of us who have been dealing with these issues for so many years and who know that there are so many tiny little incidents and that they're finally being brought out in the air, and that I'm sure that in many places people are still being told, don't be alone with this guy. The fact that Stephen Cohen and Steinhardt are finally, someone speaking out against them, and that more people are saying we have to speak out against them. It's a big deal. It really is the turning of the tide.
So I feel like Miriam just spoke to us like from beyond the grave. She's like here and she's like telling us what she wants to say to us about the power of this, about the power of the sharing, and sort of leaving us her legacy. A few people have said something to that effect. She's leaving her passion and her insights, her life as a woman. Nothing happened. Like, oh, nothing happened to me, just like 10 zillion things, but like nothing. I think a lot of us feel that way. The truth is I deeply identified with that too. But anyway, okay, that was, wow. Faye, the last speaker.
So I'm just gonna say first, I'm hoarse because we did flat out Shiva here. I don't believe in Shiva breaks. Unfortunately, I've had experience Shiva, here in Teaneck. We did Zoom, but we also did flat out, starting with maybe in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, because I've had the experience of like driving to Long Island and having to wait getting stuck in traffic, and having to wait in a car for an hour, and locals are nodding, and so I just had to wear this. I'm a little, but I would say a couple of things. Yonina talked about what's gone on in Riverdale, and I am very Riverdale adjacent. I'm as close to living in Riverdale as anyone who doesn't live in Riverdale. I lived there for a long time. My kids went to the SAR for 32 years. So you're very aware of that, with the Riverdale situation. I was but I want to talk just for a moment is, I don't know if it's totally coherent. By the end of the Shiv, I had the whole story down. And the story was that I really was very unaware, despite being a member of GamAni, which I became when I started to be very involved with programming in our shul, which is a kind of a flagship shul in the modern Orthodox world, or at least we think so. But there's some other people who think so too. So first stop on the Regain Your Reputation tour would be. So Miriam said, you got to join. And so then, I knew what was going on, but a couple of things. First of all, I didn't know about, I knew, like, for instance, I didn't know that she knew Asher. We had discussed Asher's work, Asher's work. There were many activists here. I mean, Asher's work is, as I think, certainly everyone here would agree, but thousands of people agree that Asher's work is not only transformative, it's transformative in so many ways, the hotline, the whole thing. So Asher, is like, when I mentioned him at the Shiva, Asher is like a quasi-celebrity or even a full celebrity in the Jewish community. I had no idea that she knew him. So there was a question of why I didn't know this. And some of these kinds of things, her level of involvement, is that one is that there's confidentiality involved, but she certainly could have had this conversation without confidentiality, respecting the confidentiality, which she totally respected. And there were times she would try to worm things out of me, which Asher, as you know, she couldn't. But she never, but I would not, there's very specific instances, the one specific, but she never shared anything. And I think the reason was because she was a very lighthearted person. So we did talk, as Judy said, about books and movies, and my grandchildren, my daughter Chamsa at the funeral, and she was a very lighthearted person, as you saw in the video. That also helped her tremendously in her activism. My niece Dahlia is on, and some of you know her. She's in Israel and working really hard, and it's really hard in Israel because, as many of you know, because the libel laws. It's like it's insane. Like, Israel. There's a lot of crazy things about it, and this is one of them.
Dahlia is here.
I'm sorry, yeah, Dahlia's here. I said she's on. No, yeah. So I said that we had a near thing here recently. Anything I say will kind of blow the cover up, but I'm going to do it anyway because the confidential groups. We had I want to talk to Rabbi Blau about this privately. He's no longer on the call. So we had a guy who was a candidate to be the rabbi of our shul. And again, we take ourselves very seriously. The guy, perfect resume. You guys all know the playbook. He gets nominated, he gets announced as a finalist. I had some suspicions about him about his general things. Announced about announced to the community within a few hours, women start coming up. Really, it was just an unbelievable thing. This guy's, it's very conceivable in this particular case, I know it's rare, that he hasn't done anything inappropriate in the past X number of years. But in the prior 15 years, a lot, there was a lot. And by the way, one is too many. And anyway, so again, I'm not going to drag this out. The guy claims, and we've all heard this, he's done tshuva. He's changed. Anyway, Miriam, I get called. I'm not going to go into all the details. I'm happy to take it one-on-one because this guy has to be brought down. Okay. And it has to be. I mean, it's already happening, right? You know, it's like, but people are murmuring, right? Rabbi Blau needs to know about this. I've talked to other people who need to know about this. Anyway, I'm in my living room. It's during COVID. So like everything is very weird. Like you can't like, oh, let's meet for a cup of coffee. You know, everyone's kind of in this, it was during, anyway, Miriam is on one line and I'm calling people like on the other line. And a friend was here at the Shiva when I told the story about Miriam's level of actors. And this is a close friend. And she's like, and she's like, it was unbelievable. Like Miriam was able to guide us through everything. She's like, and now he's going to say this. Then he would say it. And now so-and-so is going to say this. Bad. It's like, and she's like, and like other people, and like my friend is like, you're a genius. I'm like, no, I'm not the genius. The person on the other end of the is like practically, oh, it's experience, it's brilliance. But she's like, you know, say I don't want to be at all like it's like child, you know, sexual abuse savant, like in every single thing. And I don't make light of these, but like every single thing in the playbook. And you've all seen it before. The advice she gave us was so wise. And it was like really, you know, I think it's very rare, you know, in a job candidacy, again, I defer to, with great respect to people who deal with this all, have had to deal with this personally or deal with it all the time. But it's very rare that, and Usher's dealt with some of these cases where it's like an hour by hour, like the guy would have gotten the job. Like that's the thing, he would have gotten the job. Like there was no doubt he would have gotten the job. So like, and she's like hour by hour, and I'm calling people on the committee. And they're like, well, you know, didn't you do things in college that you were embarrassed of? And I felt like saying, and I said to them, not like this, you know, because people love that tshuva narrative. That's it. That's, you've all heard that. And Asher, I know Asher, the only person I've talked about, Asher died. You, Dali, because of Israel, no one even claims to have done tshuva. They claim they didn't do it, even though there's 1,000 accusers. But, you know, and this guy was not in a situation, I'm done, but not in the situation of being able to say the accusers are crazy, because we all knew them. It was all secret. I would say 90% of the members of my shul do not know what happened. But these women, you know, like he didn't have, you know, you can always paint people as crazy unless they're the people who've been sitting next to you in shul for 10 years, a little harder. And so, but Miriam, she was so good at this. So it was her dedication, but the level of confidentiality that was unbelievable. And this is someone like, I now know that I was not in, it was her texting me we texted during the commercial breaks of This Is Us to review the prior scene and predict what would happen next. And so we were in close touch, but there were a lot of people she was in close touch with. And so, you know, we were really close, but never heard about any of this. And so, you know, like I will miss her, but I'm so proud of her. And, you know, I think she taught us a lot. And, you know, counting on you guys to carry on. I mean, like people need to carry on. You don't know that, you don't need to hear that from me. You know, Balabatim, you know, congregants and people of communities need to carry on. I mean, again, the Riverdale thing, I think the most recent thing is a wake-up call for people that like, but, you know, people have to learn what it means. People are starting, not only what Miriam said about Michael Steinhardt, people have to learn, people on boards need to learn what it means to be complicit, what their role is. I mean, there's next steps on this that we're now at. And Miriam, you know, I made sure that she knew about what was going on with the Jofa thing. I talked to Yehuda. By then she was doing it was her drunk texting, by the way. That was all because she was on so many painkillers. Like I saw her a few weeks prior, she was on a lot of painkillers, but she wasn't talking nonsense. She was just telling me every secret that anyone had ever told her, except anything about this. Like really, like it was almost like it was like as if something had come unlatched. So every single secret, you know, everything. It was like we had a very lavish, like over the top, gross family wedding. Not in the family I share with Avi and Dahlia. Unfortunately, the other side, it was beyond. It was nuts. We were there in LA 6 weeks ago. She shared with me what every relative told her about their impressions of this. It was like and I'm like racking my brains to think, have I told her anything recently that I do not want her to share? So in this drug-induced spilling, she's still nothing. about GamAni. It was in a different compartment of her brain and her heart. So, keep up the good work, and, please carry on. We need you. The abusers, like the things that people try to get away with are it's just unbelievable. It's just like, I'm not like Miriam. I'm a total cynic. When it happens, I was like, I'm like our mother. It's like, I knew all along that guy was a sleazeball from day one. When I was on Wall Street, my favorite thing was shorting stocks, not buying them. So I knew, I believe the worst about everyone. So, but that was not her, and her optimism. I'll try to carry some of that through. It's a little late in my life to try to have that kind of personality transplant. But, she led a truly inspiring life in ways that I knew for 60 years and in a huge way that I did not know.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Faye, and thank you for being here. And I love that story about having her on the line, and she's telling you all these things, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen.
My friend who is here, she's a close friend, and she's young. She's probably not even 40 yet. And it was a very traumatic experience. Nowhere, and for the women, talk about triggering. These women are like, the women are saying, I will not walk. This is an Orthodox shul. You take this all very going to shul. I will not walk into shul if this guy's the rabbi. And people are like, we don't care. I mean, it's like,
Yeah. I just want to, wow. I just want to say one thing about how you said that she's brilliant. She was brilliant in so many ways, like so brilliant. I just want to say that she said the same thing about you. She always, you showed up in our chats a lot. She always would say things like, my sister says X, and my sister's, so brilliant about everything. She said that often, like all the time. And I'm listening to her. I have like her voice in my head telling me how brilliant you are, and you're telling how brilliant she is. And that is so special.
Well, that's like so close. We were really close, and I'm watching a new show. We talked about this, Life is Beth, the Amy Schumer show. It's a perfect morning show. It's about grieving, and I'm like, how could she not? She's gonna miss this show. It's like show for her. But
well, we're thinking about you and your family, and all we can do is, think about you and continue Miriam's legacy, learn from her, and all the things that everybody said here about just learning all this and holding it and, paying it forward, I guess.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of people here who are activists, please keep up the activism, and there are people here who suffered terrible things in their lives, and, your strength and, the words like strength and resilience are overused but appropriate here, so, I'm glad that Miriam was able to help you in some way. Life, you some people here have dealt with like really unimaginable things, so, we hope for more progress and,
Amen. And I wish you strength and resilience too.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else want to say anything? Tough. Okay, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing. And yeah.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you, Elaine. What a beautiful job facilitating.
Thanks. I want to thank you, Lana, for putting it together and for collecting all the speakers, and really for being the drive behind this event when we all, with the holidays and everything.
Sure. Really, we'll do more. We'll do more. I have other thoughts and other ideas, but we'll talk about it later on. I have some thoughts. I'd like to collect this also maybe in other ways. And okay. Also, I changed the dedication of my new book. I have a book coming out called When Rabbis Abuse. It's coming out on June 14th. It's dedicated to Miriam's memory. So anyway, a lot of things that came up here are things that I've been writing about. So anyway, okay, to be continued. Take care, everyone. And thanks for being here also.
Bye-bye.
Bye.